You're not edgy, cool, and punk rock because you pretend to not care and you can't afford to eat. Well, maybe that is a bit punk rock.
It's the Creators Hustle.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Creators Hustle, where we deal with the business of the entertainment industry. I am Richard Chemaly, and today we're looking at professionalizing your brand. First, thank you to our sponsors below, pew, 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 and let's go. So you wake up one morning, decide you're a rapper. Your name is Lil Cup, and you convince your mom to like your Facebook page. Maybe you've even gotten a gig or two, or even recorded a track. So you've got the art bit down, but you also want to take it to the next level business-wise. Here are 5 things you should lock down at the start of your music career. Or if the start of your music career is long ago, then you don't have those things. So still not too late, I guess. Tip number 1, your internet presence. Starting social media profiles is a vibe and exciting, and often people think that you need to be present on as many profiles as possible, or platforms. This is a bit of a give and take. Yeah, the more profiles you have, the bigger your reach can be, but having dead social profiles is probably worse than having no profile. And having a non-responsive profile is probably worse than having a dead profile. So take on only as much as you can. Many artists have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter profiles, maybe now TikTok, but are only active on 1 or 2 of them, leaving the 3rd and 4th dry and ugly. If you have trust fund privileges, then you could use a social media agency, but until you have a lot of traffic, that might be quite a bit of overkill. More important than social media presence, though, is a web presence. Artists almost always underrate a web page, probably because they don't use it properly. But having a place which acts as the custodian of your brand is vital. It need not be a whole website, a simple landing page will suffice. Crack in your bio, some pictures, links to your music, and you can get more elaborate as you go along. Tip number 2, get your legal documents in order. Not only does it make you look more professional and that you seem to know what you're doing, but having proper documents contributes to what we in the legal industry call legal certainty. And if done right, puts people you work with in the same frame of mind in terms of their expectations. There's nothing worse than arriving at a gig believing that they will provide you a drum kit only to find that you were expected to bring it. Or preparing a sick background for your performance in terms of a visual only to find that they have no screens. Well, actually, I've been in places where there are such worse things than that. When you're in a band for 2 years and then there's a lineup change and now you have to deal with who owns the rights to the music you wrote 2 years ago. That gets pretty ugly. So pull out your best Latin, pacta sunt servanda, what? That just means agreements must be kept, and get your agreements drafted. Basic agreements you should have in your template library include a booking form, a tech rider, a hospitality rider, especially if you're going to be performing out of town, and maybe session music agreements. If you're more than a one-person show, it would be worth your while to sit with a lawyer and build an agreement with the band members once off. Tip number 3, business cards. I've said before that they're so 1996, but they could still be effective if you get creative. They don't have to be cards, but something physical that encourages people to look at them and think of you. I can remember a restaurant back in Parkhurst which had really cool coasters that we liberated and left in our living room. So every time my mates would come over, we'd play some PlayStation and feel like a drink afterwards. We'd be confronted with the brand right in front of us, and more often than not, we would go to that particular restaurant. I've mentioned some ideas in previous videos, but additional to those, you can get creative. Obviously, things like bottle openers and fidget spinners, if people still do that, and lighters are useful, but they're saturated as branding mechanisms, so they get lost in the noise of all the others that are using it. So finding a good balance between usefulness and creativity is vital. And then, of course, you need stickers. You do need stickers. I mean, they are abused and overused, but still, have you ever played in a dive bar if your sticker isn't in the bathroom mirror even? Tip number 4, internal policy. Whether you're a one-person show or an orchestra, the major lacking thing with artists in the business of music is some form of self-control. Probably because they tend to take it as it comes. But corporates spend millions on developing their own house style, and while you're not really expected to spend that much, the same reasoning still applies to you. See, when you go to a bar and order a particular beer, you do it because you have the expectations of what it will taste like. If it tastes as good as you expect it to, then your expectation is met and great. But if the beer is stale or they poured it in the wrong glass, you're disproportionately more disappointed. So the allure of the beer only exists to the extent that you're aware that meeting the expectation will satisfy you. Similarly, when organizers and agents deal with artists, they have an expectation of what dealing with that artist will be like. And if you're starting out or you want to create an impression that dealing with you will be satisfying and meet the expectation that attracted them to you in the first place, then you need to set that expectation. In other words, it's a two-step process. You need to show that dealing with you is a better experience than they would usually get elsewhere, and that the experience that they have with you will satisfy their expectations. Basically, go out, sit down, and think of what you want people to think of you. Then write that down. Then think of what you believe you have to do to make them think that of you, and write that down. After that, turn that document into a policy and keep to it, so that the experience of working with you is always a consistently good one for anyone who does. Tip number 5, collect and publish testimonials. Word of mouth is great for marketing, but often word doesn't travel far enough as would be ideal, and also not fast enough. To this end, you should do what you can to catalyze it. The best way of doing this is collecting testimony. Now, few artists have the guts to ask somebody to make a public statement about them, and it is a bit of an anti-humility thing. It may seem, but hey, if you can be on stage and perform, there's little reason why you can't ask somebody if they're willing to publicly state that you did a good job, especially if they say it to your face first. You could do it in a number of subtle ways, like if after your set the organizer says it was great working with you, you really know how to do it and how to rev up a crowd, you could simply say, "Thanks so much, could I quote you on that?" Which would result in an answer. Now, some might say no, and that's something that you shouldn't be offended by. Perhaps they don't believe in the power of their conviction, or there are some other forces at play. But you can't take no to auto mean that you did a poor job. The question is, where do you put all of these quotes? Well, if you did a good job and had a photographer, you can use the quote as a caption to a post on the performance. Perhaps you can expand your webpage to have a testimonial section. It's just good to build on an arsenal of great things people say about you. But be classy. If you source testimony from a public source like a blog review or something, then great. If it was something someone said verbally, send out a mail to the source clarifying what you'd like to do with it and whether you got the quote right. At least then you'll have proof in writing if they ever come back and say, "No, we didn't say that," which does happen. But that's it for the Creators Hustle this week. If you'd liked the video and found it useful, I'm not really bothered for you to subscribe or ring bells or tell YouTube it was great. Just share it with your muso friends who might find it useful too. Let us know what we should deal with in the comments below, and